Good afternoon. The arson unit is investigating following a fire at a residence in northwest Calgary in the 100 block of Hounslow Drive, northwest, on Wednesday, May 8th, 2013. The Calgary Police Service and the Calgary Fire Department were called to this location for reports of a home on fire. Upon arrival, firefighters observed part of the residence on fire. The fire was extinguished and the home was deemed safe for entry at that time. Emergency responders entered the home and discovered a sophisticated marijuana grow operation in the basement of that residence. A search warrant was executed by the Alert Green Team South, who seized marijuana growing equipment and a total of 957 marijuana plants with a potential street value of $1.2 million. Alberta Health Services has deemed the residence unfit for human habitation, and members of Calgary's Coordinated Safety Response Team also attended and have fenced off the property pending the completion of remediation. An illegal electrical bypass is believed to be the cause of the fire, and the arson unit's investigation is continuing into this offense.
Have you contacted the owners or the renters in this?
We have been in contact with the owner of the property, yes, and at this point we believe it was a rental property.
And have you tracked down those renters?
Have not. To date, we have not, no.
How serious was the fire? Like, can you just speak to the scope?
The origin of the fire was in the upper level of the bungalow residence. The grow operation was discovered in the basement. The fire and the fire damage was localized in nature on the upper level. So the damage from fire itself would be relatively minor, but suppression activities and the damage from the grow operation made it pretty extensive.
Were there residents in the home when you attended?
There were not residents at the time that the fire department attended. Not to say that it wasn't resided in at the time that this occurred. There's no evidence at this point that anybody was seen leaving the residence.
Do you want to just go over maybe what what owners can do in terms of trying to prevent this if they're renting out their homes or using them as investment properties?
I guess my opinion would be, and what I've seen in fires related to this, owners of properties have to be diligent and be creative in checking on their properties on a regulated basis, whether that's monthly or whatever legally they can do to get access to maintain contact with those renters is pretty important.
Have there been arrests made in this case yet?
There have not, no.
So was the fire caused by the grow up in some way?
And that's my challenge. I mean, part of the investigation is linking that electrical bypass to the grow operation, and then further to that, linking any potential residents to that. So that's the timely process of our job.
How much potential is there for fire when this is done, when the electricity is altered?
The potential is great. My experience with marijuana grow ops in general is there's a number of different ways that fire can occur. We've seen just bad things happen generally when you mix electricity and water, but the bypass scenario is pretty common as well.
So you haven't been able to lead charges because you haven't contacted these renters or because you haven't established this name?
I'm still working on the identity of the renters. There's been, without getting into the details of the investigation, there's been a couple potential names, but I have to work to confirm that those names were in fact renters, that they were legal names and so forth and so on. So.
Had this house been flagged before, like the neighbors called in to report anything, or was this kind of new to you guys?
The residence hasn't been flagged to my knowledge. The fact that a fire occurred drew me into this investigation, but in speaking to the neighbors, there was certainly an indication that something potentially suspicious was going on, and I'll leave it at that.
Can you just, reiterate how important it is for neighbors to call you guys if they do suspect something?
Well, it is very important, and in the little time that I spent in the neighborhood on that day of May 8th and days following, I've learned that there were a number of neighbors, or speaking generally to neighborhoods where this happens, people have an idea. Oftentimes a number of people have ideas that something may be going on. Speaking to your neighbors is important, and coming up with a strategy to get their message to law enforcement or to whoever they can that can do something about it is important. So sharing the information is a good thing.
Maybe we'll get past
I don't have that evidence now. I don't have those linkages I talked about, and it's a number of different items that would speak to the residency and the occupancy of the home. I haven't been able to go through because there was a large amount of property seized from the home. So I want to be thorough in that respect before I entertain bringing people in and even entertain charges. So.
Is it the link that between the renters and the home you haven't made yet, or the cause of the fire?
Well, there's both the relationship between the owner and the renters, verifying who they think is occupying the home, and then establishing whether the names that he or she has are in fact the people that live there. So that's the challenge.
Could the homeowner be facing any charges or anything like that?
Not at this point in the investigation, no.
Could you just spell your first and last name for us and your rank?
I'm a detective, and my first name is Brad, B-R-A-D. My last name is Weinberger, W-E-I-N-B-E-R-G-E-R.
Great. Thanks, Brad.
You're welcome.
I could probably help with a few of the questions that were being asked. So, your last question I could probably answer right away if you, I can't remember what you said.
Yeah, I was just curious if the homeowner maybe facing any charges.
Oh no, there was something else just before that.
The role the neighbors have to play.
Yes, I think that's something that we'd really like to emphasize, especially as the police service put on as the alert green team, is that the role that neighbors play and the role that neighborhoods play in reporting these crimes is key to our success in being able to combat this problem. I think a common thing that we often hear is that neighbors had some idea that something was going on, but that failure to report and give the police that ability to investigate it. So I'd like to encourage all people to, if you're suspicious of a house in your neighborhood, to definitely make that call. If you're worried about your own identity being revealed, there's several ways you can go about reporting it. One, of course, is Crime Stoppers, the most common way. We also have a drug tip line, which I'll be happy to provide that number. And it can also be reported on the www.alert.ca website as well.
Are people becoming more educated about this and about what to look for, the signs of grow-ups in their neighborhood?
I think a lot of people are paying a lot more attention to what's going on in their neighborhoods. It's just that we're missing that one link of actually making that next step and phoning it in and reporting it. But I think one thing I really want to get through is that can be done anonymously, where you will never be contacted by a police officer, and it is up to the police to individually corroborate your information and try to see if there is, in fact, if that is the problem. But we'd like to at least have that ability to investigate that and look into that problem.
Yeah, do you think people are reluctant to call, just in the sense that they're not sure, they don't want to become involved, and I guess they don't want to bother you guys?
I think there could be several reasons. I think what you touched on lastly, oftentimes people feel that they are bothering the police. What I'd like to say is that you're not bothering the police. That is what we're here for. That is our role within the community. But we can't do our job without help from the community as well. So we'd like to encourage people to make that next step and do that. And it can be done quite easily anonymously.
Yeah. Are people becoming more aware?
I think through media releases like this, I think it's becoming a much bigger issue. That especially with the dawn of more medical marijuana things coming out, people are becoming more educated about it. The signs of grow-ops have changed probably a little bit over the years. I shouldn't say they've changed. I think that they've probably become a little bit. Growers have become smarter about how they do it, so you're not seeing the typical signs. What you're probably seeing more of now is that suspicious neighborhood, the one you don't see very often, the lack of activity at a particular residence, the lack of regular maintenance in that. But now that it's spring, people are starting to come back out of their houses. They're starting to meet the neighbors that they hadn't seen for a while. And when you don't see that neighbor coming out and it seems somewhat suspicious, that's the time we want people to call and give us the opportunity to investigate those tips.
How frequent is the use of the electrical bypass, and I guess reiterate how dangerous that is?
I don't have exact numbers but I would say that it's in the majority of grow-ops we go into. It's quite common to see a electrical bypass, and not uncommon to see a water bypass as well. So there's theft happening on two different levels there, which we're all ultimately end up paying for in our higher taxes, higher bills.
As the public becomes more aware, are these growers becoming more aware as well, in terms of maybe smaller grow-ops, making it a little bit more difficult to spot the signs?
I think it could be part and parcel. I mean, we definitely have seen smaller grow-ups over the years. That being said, this was a rather large one in terms of what we have seen in as of recent. Technology changes with everything, and so it becomes somewhat easier for people to be able to mask that. But we also have ways to be able to look into these things too. And as technology changes, it actually changes in favor of both parties oftentimes. So,
It's a wash.
yeah.
When you said that this was I guess, a sophisticated operation, was there anything that set this operation apart from the other grow-up?
We use the word sophisticated just because it's not someone growing it in their closet who's only got one light and a few plants. It's taking up an entire basement area. It's including a water electrical bypass. It's numerous plants at different stages. So it's not a college kid growing it in his closet. But if I can really quickly just touch on something too that was brought up, and it has been brought up as of recently too, and Detective Weinberger touched on it, but the role that landlords play with their property, and it's very applicable to this particular one, is I can't emphasize enough that under the Residential Tenancies Act, it does allow, there is a provision within the Residential Tenancies Act for a landlord to inspect their property with 24 hours notice. And what I would say to landlords is I would encourage you to inspect your properties on a regular basis and use that provision under the Residential Tenancies Act, because you can find yourself faced with thousands and thousands of dollars in remediation damage. And in this particular case, regardless of whether there's criminal charges come out of it, the homeowner will still face substantial remediation charges that could potentially be in excess of value of what equity they have inside the home, depending.
Do you know if insurance still covers remediation?
I think that's probably something you'd have to specifically address with the Insurance Bureau of Canada. My understanding is it can, depending if you're a landlord, you do have to inspect your property on a regular basis, and if you're not able to prove that, they may make your insurance null and void too. But that's probably something better answered by the insurance company. But I know with the banks, oftentimes on a property like this, it can be foreclosed on, which puts, and then as we've seen as of recently, innocent people with a judgment against them on a bank have substantial judgment.
That's a real deterrent for owners to notify you folks if they happen to, stumble across a grow-up, in the sense that, they just tell the people that are there to get out, and then just not say anything for fear that they're going to lose their home.
Well, that's been brought up before. I think there could be substantial, but if you're doing that due diligence on your home and checking it on a regular basis, you're not going to see substantial damage to the point where remediation is going to cost you a lot of money. There's a flip side to that as well, though. If you don't phone it in and that property is not properly remediated, you could find yourself in more of a civil litigation process where now you're on the hook for even more if it's found out that you were negligent in telling that there was actually a grow up in that residence.
How many times would you check your place if you had a property?
Well, as a matter of fact, I actually did have a rental property, and I checked it once monthly. So I do a 24-hour notice to inspect. That included both the exterior and the interior of the property. So I actually can speak a little bit on that, but I know a lot of landlords don't. But again, that goes back to another larger issue: is it fair to the rest of the neighborhood that we have for lack of a better term, a bit of a slum landlord never checking on their property? You do have an obligation as a landlord to check on your property and make sure that it's compliant with bylaws as well.
What are some of the dangers that are involved being the next door neighbor or the neighborhood in general to having a grow up right there?
Well, I mean, the actual grow up doesn't present an enormous amount of danger to the neighboring properties. It's when we get things such as we've seen in this one with a fire. We have seen, the odd time where there's been a home invasion, robbery, where it has been the wrong home. Again, that's another reason why, as a neighbor, I would want to encourage the police to investigate it so that I wasn't having those type of things, so that I didn't have the someone hitting my house or doing a home invasion on my house inadvertently. So.
Is this pretty uncommon that you would discover a grow-up like this as a result of going for a fire call, or has this happened before?
It has happened before. I wouldn't say it's common. Over the last few years, I think we've, off the top of my head, I want to say maybe half a dozen. There hasn't been a lot. We have seen instances where there has been there looks like there's been a fire inside of a residence before. It hasn't got to the stage where it's been gone into a full-blown fire where the fire department's been called. This particular case, this did come in from a neighborhood resident who did report that there was potentially an issue with the home. Calgary Fire Department attended, found the grow operation inside the house, and henceforth the police service was called.
And just to be clear, I know Detective Weinberger touched on it, but when you surveyed neighbors, they did say in hindsight, yeah, we saw it?
They didn't see, I believe Detective Weinberg said that he'd spoken with neighbors and that they had suspicions of the residents, that there was something.